right. Well, we might get going, everybody. It's oh, hello, Sophie. We've actually got the participants largely on quiet for the minute. Intention will be to do some housekeeping and enable you guys to hit Q&A along the way. So welcome. Everyone's working from home or near enough, I anticipate. All righty. Well, look, without further ado, I think we'll get started for the session. Thanks everybody for coming along to the first in a series of PD sessions we're putting on for the Australian school sector. My name's Matt Jones. I'm one of the directors of EduHealth Solutions. My business partner, Damien Cairns, is sitting in the wings listening on. In the interest of not clogging your screens with too many faces, we just kept it to myself and the ladies from So Echo. First and foremost, we do hope that this session finds everyone safe and healthy and still relatively sane given the current circumstances. We recognise that schooling from home and remote learning and all the jazz that's going on at the moment is an interesting new paradigm, to say the least. Something we're hoping that comes along through this session and some of the others we'll be hosting in the next few weeks is that action plans and implementation stuff can get going despite all of this. And we hope some of that comes through in today's session. In terms of housekeeping, we've opted to basically keep an eye on the question and answer box as we go along. I'll take some notes and log your questions as we go, and we'll turn to a Q&A at the end of the session. We can open that up to voice as well on request. And with that in mind, I'm very pleased to introduce our sustainability partners, Lona Parry and Clare and Lona from So Echo for Schools, here today to step through sustainability in schools, people, planet, budgets. On that note, I'm going to pass you straight over to Clare to get things underway. Clare, over to you.
Thank you, Matt, and hello everyone, and welcome to our webinar this afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us. It's really good to have your company on this sort of sunny but rather chilly day. Lona and I are actually really excited to be able to talk to you today about the positive impact that sustainable schools can have on their people, the planet, and their budgets. And our aim is that the content of this webinar will inspire you and hopefully give you some thoughts to start creating a vision for you when you go back to your schools and start planning how you can implement sustainability there. So what are we going to cover today? It's really three key areas. We're going to start with asking the question, why is it actually important for schools to invest time and money in developing an environmentally responsible culture at their schools? What are the positive impacts, secondly, that result from taking this action? And thirdly, we're going to look at a practical but simple tool which will enable you to assess where your school's at now in terms of sustainability, but also a simple action plan which will help you progress some easy first steps to get you on that path. So just to reiterate what Matt said, we really welcome any questions, so please fire them through if they come up through the webinar, and we will make sure that we try and address every single one that comes through. We do want to finish, for your sake, at 4:30, so if we can't get through all the questions, Lona and I are really happy to write answers to those and to circulate them to all the participants. Okay, on that note, let's start with the first really important question. Why should we as schools invest time and money in developing an environmentally responsible culture at school? Well, we're going to cover four key reasons today. The first one is the clear scientific data that is out there. And really that's telling us that we have a problem for our planet and for our people. Secondly, we'll look at your community's values and really listen to what those voices are saying, but also try and understand how do students and staff, leadership and parents, how do they view the part that schools play in sustainability education? Thirdly, we'll look at the growing evidence that shows that sustainable schools can have a really positive impact on their students' well-being. And lastly, there are significant environmental and financial benefits that can be attained by schools through achieving resource efficiencies. And we're going to look at a school that's really focused on their waste systems and see what benefits they've actually managed to achieve. So let's start with the science, because really that's telling us that we have a problem, a big problem, and there's quite confronting evidence and information out there telling us about climate change, talking about the unsustainable use of resources on our planet. And our students, who are very good at getting information from the internet, are all over this. They can access that information, and they're reading and they're listening. Something that I find confronting really is that first sentence. So climate change is the defining challenge of our time. Moving through that paragraph, the bottom sentence, the science is telling us that even if we are successful in limiting warming to 1.5 degrees, we will face significantly increased risks to natural and human systems. Let's have a look at a few other snippets. We know now, we've known for some time, that the world has been getting warmer, and we're seeing in our lives the effects of the global warming that's taking place and how it's affecting our weather patterns. We're seeing some fires in summer, there's extreme flooding in parts of the country, extreme droughts in other parts of the country. We're hearing information such as the global mean temperature for last year being 1.1 degrees above pre-industrial levels already. The past decade has been reported as the warmest on record. And of course, that global warming is absorbed by our oceans, and the heat content actually reached record high levels yet again in 2019 for our oceans. And as they warm, they expand and sea levels rise. And that rise is actually increased by the melting not only of the ice on the land, but also the melting of the ice sheets in Greenland and Antarctica. And of course, these little bits of information that I've given to you today, they're just the absolute snippet on the top of the iceberg in terms of what's out there from the science. But I think they raise two really important questions for us to consider. Firstly, as educators, how can we react positively to the science and lead by example to our students? And secondly, what feelings does this data elicit in us as adults, and therefore how might that impact our young people? Now I'm going to hand over to Lona, and she's going to talk with us about what the voices of students and parents and principals are currently saying in today's climate.
Thank you, Claire. I'm just going to do a little bit of IT magic, and hopefully I will be able to take control of the screen. So Claire, can you see, are we all ready to go now?
Yes, that's great.
Outstanding. That was seamless, ladies. Well done.
So, as Claire said, the science is really clear. Climate change is real, it's here now, and it will continue to impact us significantly in the future. How then does that translate back into our community? What do we think and feel about that and those impacts of climate change? Well, we know that our parents believe that the environment should be an intrinsic part of our children's education and learning. And that's also being mirrored these days by more and more principals who are recognizing that, and they're actually taking a really positive stand and leading the way. Our students are making it abundantly clear that they also are wanting us to take some action on climate change, We see that in their school strikes for climate, and I think there's a lot of discussions going on these days in our school arenas. We're hearing what students are having to say, and even our own children at home, we're often hearing those conversations. They're concerned. It's really important to them. So going to the wider community, what do they think and feel about it? Well, Sustainability Victoria undertook some research last year into exactly that. They looked at what are Victorians' perception of climate change, and they came up with some really good data. And I'm just going to share with you three, what I think is some really significant points coming out of that research. The first of those is that Victorians think that less than half of their fellow Victorians are concerned about climate change, whereas in reality, 4 out of 5 are deeply concerned. The second of those bits of data was that a whopping 78% of Victorians support the Paris Target Agreement for meeting net zero emissions by 2050. And finally, and one I think which is actually the most important and of most relevance to us working in schools and with students, is that climate change and the environment is really important to students, and particularly to those aged 15 to 17. They're ranking it second behind education, and it's beginning to cause them a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress. So how then do we mitigate that stress, that anxiety, and how do we then promote student well-being? Well, I think it'd be quite useful to remind ourselves of those 5 core values in the Australian Student Wellbeing Framework. And those are leadership, inclusion, student voice, partnerships, and support. So how then does sustainability underpin these 5 values and support it? Well, let's turn to the first of those key values, which was leadership. How does a school show really great leadership to its students? They start off by firstly acknowledging and recognizing that the environment is really important to students. They care deeply about it and they're concerned about it. And then having recognized that and acknowledged that, it's about then implementing and importantly committing to a long-term program that's going to tackle climate change through embedded sustainability. And by doing both of these things, it enables the young people, your students, to start see real value in your school. Because if you can recognize and value what they think and what really concerns them, that then enables them to value you. And importantly, you're then starting to show commitment to doing something about it, which is really important. Inclusion. In 2010, the UK published a really great bit of research, which was looking at the impacts of sustainability and sustainability programs in schools. And they found that sustainability brings, brings an ethic of care and common vision for building a more just and inclusive school and society. And it's really that common vision, that common purpose through a sustainability vision that brings cohesion to the community, the school community. And again, it's through this shared sustainability vision that the report found that there was high levels of connectedness and pride in the school. Support. How does your school then show support for its students? Well, as we said, it's about recognizing and valuing what's important to them. So recognize that climate change is a real issue for them. Then commit to a program that's going to embed sustainability long term. Then facilitate opportunities for your students to get involved in that program. And you might like to think about setting up an Enviro student team. Get students from across the year levels to join that team and to be a part of what you're trying to do. I think also start looking at who are your passionate teachers within the school, and allocate them roles as sustainability coordinators. Not only do that, but allow them time release so that they can really support and promote your sustainability program, but also support your students, and that's key. This is something that I think we often forget to do, to celebrate, recognise and reward your staff and your students for all the great things that they're doing. There are some really inspirational students out there, and indeed staff members, that are really championing sustainability in schools, and it's really important to recognise and celebrate those efforts. Partnerships, and I'm really talking about partnerships across the school community. Your sustainability program shouldn't just remain in the confines of your school precincts. Sustainability needs to go beyond those school gates and out into the wider community. So it's about connecting with local businesses or organisations, perhaps even local friends groups, and importantly, your parent group. I think they're often a really untapped and valuable resource out there in the community, and they can bring a phenomenal expertise, resource, energy and passion to your sustainability program. So it's about getting them involved, engaging and bringing them on board with what you're trying to do. It's going back to that shared vision. So communicate with them. Now, Sustainability Victoria, they've done yet further research, and this year, which was actually in June 2020, so just a couple of months ago, they published some findings from a new report, which was looking at, again, sustainability and the impacts on student welfare and well-being. And again, some really great data coming out of this new research. And I just want to share with you 3 key findings from that. The first of those was that 86% of leaders, and by leaders I mean the principals and sustainability coordinators, 86% of those leaders agreed that the Resource Smart Schools program helped schools to develop a positive school community. 79% agreed that it supported the social and emotional development of students. And almost 3/4 of teachers, 72%, agreed that the program helped schools to engage with parents and families. So I think this sort of further and very new research really endorses the earlier research that we spoke about, that highlights that sustainability and really effective sustainability programs can have such a positive impact, not only on your students, but also that wider community. Student voice. Now, this is the 5th and final of those framework values. And for Clare and I think it's actually the most important component to any successful sustainability program. As we mentioned, it's really vital that students are engaged, they're empowered and they're given a voice. Enable them to lead your program, to get actively involved and to lead it. And I think you'll be really surprised at what they can do. Now, earlier this week, I asked some of the sustainability students at Caroline Chisholm Catholic College to share with us some of their views about sustainability, what they think about it and how they feel, and why sustainability is really important to them at their school. So I'm just going to play for you a short video showcasing and highlighting what they think. Oh. Sorry, I'm just going on. There we go. Right, here we are.
Yes, go.
So why is it important to you that our school supports sustainability?
It is important that sustainability is embedded into our school since our generation is the future. Our school is a large and diverse community. Therefore, we have the potential to influence a large audience. If we want to live on this earth for a long time, then we believe that sustainability should always be something incorporated into our lives, starting at school so that we are able to grow into it. Practicing sustainability will empower students to construct knowledge, explore values, and develop an appreciation of the environment and its relationship to their world. This paves the foundation for an environmentally responsible adulthood.
It aligns with our school values to be the best we are called to be. As members of our community and society, we have a responsibility to look after our environment. Especially as we live in a society where pollution is at an all-time high, Caroline Chisholm's staff and students all have a duty to be sustainable. It is important because the impacts on the environment are going to affect us and our livelihoods. As Catholics and the wider humanity, we are called to look after the earth and therefore must change our actions to make sure we undertake God's orders and to care for the creation which He has provided for us.
Thank you, Luann and Jade, for your answers. Now let's move on to the next question. Why is it important that students take a leading role in embedding sustainability at your school?
It is important that students take a leading role in embedding sustainability at our school in order to show that those in the community the importance of sustainability in our daily lives. We can demonstrate sustainable practices and solutions to modern problems such as waste and pollution, encouraging everyone to further involve themselves in this movement. In truth, it is the students who are the heart of the school, and our collective actions as a student body will enable us to achieve a sustainable development. Students are the future teachers, future engineers, future doctors, future workers. It is vital that we instill the sustainable mindset into students in order to build a sustainable future.
Sustainability is something important to embed into our school because school is an environment that provides an amazing opportunity for voices to be heard and actions to be made, even for the tiny steps that are needed to take in hope to combat large problems associated with the environment. I think we all have a responsibility to treat our earth well, and that is a message that can be delivered and demonstrated well to others, especially in an educational environment like school.
Thank you, Jenny and Christine, for your response. Next question is, how can principals support their students to lead an effective sustainability program?
Principals can support their students to lead an effective sustainability program by encouraging more students to join in, incorporate sustainability into the school's curriculum, and to enable different practices that may work as solutions. The principal is a key figure in the consideration and approval of all ideas and initiatives relating to sustainability at his or her school.
Thank you, Kathy. And the next question would be, what would your advice be to students at other schools looking to support or get involved in their school sustainability program? Well, personally, my advice to students would be to actively look and get involved into any of the school's sustainability programs. Join in and be passionate towards a cause. There's nothing to lose. While the first step is the hardest, it is also the most important step. Educate oneself and be proactive. Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everyone. Now, the teachers have done really well to be quiet, so would anyone like to add a comment before we say goodbye and wish the webinar well?
A proud moment to hear these student voices and hear that passion and their plan. Well done.
Last chance, guys, before we conclude. So all the best to all the people who participated in the webinar, and we wish you well in your endeavours.
Well done, girls.
So, as you can hear, the students are really passionate about their sustainability program. So I want to thank them all for sharing their views, their passion with us, and really, I think, demonstrating so clearly what students, how they're thinking and feeling at the moment. And I think their views and passions will be mirrored and reflected across students across all our schools.
So we've spoken and talked a little bit about the benefits, the real positive benefits of sustainability on student well-being. I'm going to hand you over to Claire now, who will run through, again, those really positive benefits of sustainability on resource efficiencies. So over to you, Claire.
Thank you, Lona. Hopefully that screen has come up okay.
Yep.
Brilliant. IT is such a great thing when it works. Terrific. That was really interesting. Thanks, Lona. I'm sure Caroline Chisholm School is really proud of those students. They're very inspiring. So we'll now move on to the fourth reason for really taking the time and money to develop a sustainable culture at your school, and that is to achieve resource efficiencies. And schools that choose to operate more sustainably, whether that's to implement sustainable infrastructure or to have sustainable policies in place or sustainable systems in place, they demonstrate reduced resource use. And there's significant financial benefits for the school from that, but also it can minimise the environmental impact of the school. So two really important positive impacts. We thought it might be useful to look at some aggregate data on this, and so we're going to use that data from Resource Smart Schools. And currently there's about 1,400 schools that are registered on the program. And the data that we'll run through is actually from 2008 to 2020. So it's about 12 years worth. I think it's important to look at data from a number of schools because with many sustainability initiatives and with issues of climate change, I think people think that their small individual action won't make a difference. And so potentially that can stop them from taking that action. But I think this data really clearly shows that when lots of individuals and lots of schools take action, the end result is actually some very significant positive impacts. So let's have a look what Resource Smart has to say. So firstly, over those 12 years, there's been a saving of over $28 million on resource bills. So that's really across energy, so electricity, gas, waste, water, and paper reams. Over that time, students and teachers have planted more than 5.4 million plants, and they would be Indigenous native plants. There's been an amazing saving of over 80,000 tonnes of greenhouse gas that's been prevented from going into our atmosphere. And 172,000 cubic metres of waste has been diverted from landfill. And to try and put that volume of waste into some sort of context for you, perhaps think about your local 25-metre swimming pool. And that much waste would actually fill 460 of those swimming pools. So it's a significant quantity. And lastly, there's been a saving of 1.5 million kilolitres of water. And again, using the swimming pool as an example, that's actually equivalent to 4,000 of those swimming pools. So that's an awful lot of water that's been saved. So that's some financial and environmental benefits on a big scale, but let's have a look at some individual schools that Lona and I have worked with on sustainability programs so that you can get an idea in terms of your school, what sort of savings might be realistic for you. So we've just listed 4 schools here, and there's 3 secondaries and 1 primary school. And you can see that the first school, the city school, has only 450 students, so it's quite small, but it has saved $22,000 since 2018 through sustainability initiatives. The larger schools, obviously, their savings are significantly more. But even a primary school of 800 people has managed to save $57,000 on the 3 years that it's been on the program. So significant financial savings. And you can perhaps think about your schools and the size that they are, and perhaps the money that's being spent on utility invoices, and think about what savings might be realistic for you. So we've talked about positive impacts, but what might that actually look like at your school? So I really want to tell you a story about a city school that 2 years ago made the decision to really change the way they thought about waste. And their goal was to embed a sustainable waste culture, which is a big goal. It's a great story though. So let's start with a bin, a landfill bin, of which this school had 100 sitting around their buildings and classrooms. Now, you can't see from this photo, I didn't have another one, but on the other side of the general rubbish hole, there's another hole which says recycling. And so it's a dual bin. So for many years, staff and students were attempting to recycle what they could in the thought that it was going to a recycling plant. However, this wasn't the case, and they found out that it was actually all going to landfill. And of course, this led to feelings for that community of frustration, perhaps of anger, and really a desire to do something about this, because they knew that they could do something more positive for their environment. So we started the process by gathering students and having a look at the waste that the school generated. And we sorted through it and tried to work out just exactly how much of that waste would be recyclable. And it came to about 75–80% by weight. It's really important to note that students were involved at this first step, and they've been involved right the way through. So going back to those well-being points, it's about giving them control. It's about allowing them to make positive change. So we talked with these students about their ideas for improvement. What would they like to see on the ground? Because ultimately they were the ones using the systems. And they suggested that it would be more appropriate to have waste stations in place in strategic locations. And so the school ended up purchasing some bins that were suitably colour-coded, and these were placed in locations around the school as determined by the students and the leadership team. And what I really liked about what this school did, it put the waste stations in the same order for each station. So for every station, blue was on the left, red was on the right. So there was complete consistency throughout the school, and the signage matched the bins. The signage was developed by the school. That was, I think, really influenced by the facilities manager, which was fantastic to see him so heavily involved as well. It was actually a real school, a whole school approach for this program. It wasn't just a matter of the school doing their analysis and then putting the bins in place. A really important part of this program was actually educating and communicating to that school community about the change. And students were involved in doing that prior to the bins being rolled out. So they outlined why the change was taking place, how it was going to impact that school community, why it was important, and what the benefits were going to be for not only the school but for the environment as a result of these changes. And so it really got people in a good mindset to accept the change when it was placed upon them. So the bins were put in place. Oh, I should add, the students also educated the community on what items went in which bin. And this was done via whole school assemblies. It was done via the screens throughout the school. So a really thorough education and engagement process took place. That actually didn't stop once the bins were in place. We did bin audits to have a look at contamination. The results of those audits were fed back to the school community so that improvements could be made and successes were celebrated. One important aspect that came out of this this education and engagement part of the program, was people were very concerned that their recycling wasn't actually going to be recycled properly. And so we made sure we investigated all the contractors that we were going to employ to take away the recycling, to ensure that they were going to use that in a circular economy and use those materials to manufacture goods. And so this was a really authentic learning situation for these students. It was a real life situation, making big infrastructure change for them, big behaviour change, and really learning about that concept of a circular economy as well. So really positive. Now let's look at the positives that came about for the school in terms of finances and also for the environment. So we can see a graph here that's been taken from Resource Smart for the school, and you can clearly see that in December 2018, the new bin systems went in place. And consistently after that, landfill volumes were reduced by 60%, which was an absolutely amazing result. The yellow line that you see there is actually a Resource Smart benchmark, and that equates to equates to 3 metres cubed per student per year. And so for those schools wanting to be sustainable around waste practices, they really need to get below that line to demonstrate that. So the school has done an amazing job in terms of reducing landfill waste. I think when things get back to some sort of normal, whatever that might mean, I think they'll work on how they can then further reduce the landfill that's generated through the school. So they've done an amazing job. Let's look at their financial savings. So in 2018, they spent nearly $12,000 on their landfill. And then once the bins were implemented, you can see that for 2019, they ended up spending only just over $3,000 for the landfill to be disposed of. So a saving of at least $8,000, which was a reduction of 70%, which is quite a phenomenal result. Remember that this is a small secondary school, 450 students, and many of you will come from schools that might have over and above 1,000 students. So it's quite likely and not uncommon that your landfill disposal costs might well be between $30,000 and say $50,000. And when you think of those sorts of figures, it's clear that, you know, a 70% reduction in those costs is really very significant, and that money can be used for educational purposes as opposed to paying a waste contractor to essentially put rubbish in the ground. So this is a great story that I hope has made sustainability within a school a bit more real for you. It's shown not only that reduced resource use can give you the significant financial savings and minimising those environmental impacts, but it's also an opportunity for students to really gain authentic learning and take control of a real life problem and make positive change. So pretty exciting stuff for that school. So we've learned about 4 key reasons for developing a sustainability culture and embedding that at your school. And just to recap those, so it's really because science is giving us some clear data and saying we have a problem. It's because voices in our community are changing and saying, we want something to be done about this. It's also because sustainable schools support student wellbeing, and it's also to achieve those resource efficiencies. So let's just summarise now the positive impacts that these sustainable schools are making on their people, on the planet, and also on their budgets. So for our students, we're seeing improved and authentic learning. They're given the chance to really develop their leadership skills and run projects. And this in turn increases their confidence. Sustainable schools really empower students with a sense of purpose and control. And they give their students a voice. And importantly, they give them practical tools that enable them to take positive, meaningful action and hopefully apply those tools later on in life when, again, they want to make change. And sustainable schools really engage their communities and give them a sense of belonging. In terms of the planet, we've clearly seen that sustainable schools are able to reduce waste into landfill, reduce their use of fossil fuels, reduce their carbon footprint, and reduce the resource demands, and support a circular economy principles. And we've seen significant financial savings are really quite achievable for sustainable schools across electricity, gas, waste and water. And this really enables much more effective use of budgeted funds. Now, I hope this has filled you with a sense of enthusiasm and that maybe you're starting to bubble away with a vision for your school and what might be potentially possible there. But also you might be thinking, well, that's all great, but what do I do now? How sustainable is my school and what can I go and do in a practical sense when I get back there? So what we've done is developed a simple practical diagnostic and it really helps you to understand where your school's at now in terms of sustainability. We'll run through that and also we'll look at an action plan which gives you some really simple actions to actually start progressing. So this is the sustainability quick view, and really it's just a few key things that are important to enable you to assess whether you are sustainable in any way. So the first really important question is about seeing whether the leadership team is supportive of a sustainability culture. And importantly, if they're not, try and understand why they're not, because then that can be worked on. Does the school have any sustainability policies in place, such as a school environment management plan? Is there an appointed sustainability coordinator that can help manage the program? And is there a team of people, so students and staff, that can support that coordinator? Because this isn't something that can be done by one person alone. Is sustainability included in your curriculum at your school? Does the school have any initiatives in place that can help with resource efficiencies? So that might be a quick walk around to see what you have in place. And lastly, what is the estimated annual expenditure on your resources? And this is really just an estimate because firstly, it will help you to understand whether the amount that you're using for your resources and the amount that you're spending is really okay for your school, or are you using really over and above what you should be for that number of students? And secondly, having those dollar figures will help you prioritise what you might like to focus on in your action plan. So our action plan is really simple, but it just gives you a few steps that you can take to really start that process happening. So firstly, it's about talking with leadership, and that might include school council or school board, because it's a team approach here. The school could consider appointing a sustainability coordinator if one isn't already in place, and certainly gathering a sustainability team is a really important step in progressing your sustainability program. Another key area is to discuss funding budget opportunities for the program. It's not really possible to embed sustainability at a school if some funds aren't invested. So that's a really key action. We think it's worthwhile to set 3 aspirational sustainability goals, and you can use your quick view results to help guide you with this, because it gives you something to focus on. Lastly, some schools find that it's helpful to have the expertise and mentoring from an outside body to start them off. And so that's a suggested action that you might be able to talk with one of the organisations listed there. So the action plan will help give you focus, and it will help give you momentum, and hopefully it will give you something practical that you can work on when you leave the webinar and you do end up being able to get back into your school environments. So we'll shoot through those 2 documents to you in Word format so that you can use them. And I really hope that the information in the webinar has not only interested you, but inspired you and really planted the seed to start developing a sustainability vision for your school. Now, we've got time for some questions. It's 4:15, so I believe Matt's been collating those. So I might hand you over to Matt now and he can take control.
Oh, and I've got a very somber sort of orange radiance coming out of my little... That was a terrific presentation. Thank you, Clare and Lona. A lot of content to try and pack into a short time. So the questions have been furrowing through. I'll maybe start with a couple. Please feel free to post anything else along the way as you're there, attendees. So this is a bit of a common one. We've introduced sustainability initiatives over the last few years, but lose focus or momentum. How do we kickstart it again?
Okay, I might grab that question. You're right, Matt. It's a really common question, and I think that the many schools suffer with this this problem. They've had a really passionate teacher that kick-started things at their school, and but that sort of perhaps the teachers left the school, or perhaps the whole program itself has lost momentum and focus. So I think it's about going back to perhaps using the tool that Claire outlined and really getting to grips with what have you got in place already at your school? What sustainability initiatives have you already done and what are already in place? Asking those questions around, well, do we have a coordinator? Do we have a sustainability team? Have we shared our vision with our community? So use the tool to ask those questions, to understand your now, where you're at, and then really to fill in the gaps. And I think it really doesn't matter whether you're at the very start of your sustainability journey or if you're further along. I think that tool and that approach can be really effective and really helpful.
Okay, awesome. Just had a good one come in that a lot of my customers suffer with. Like, how can you involve the parents in a secondary school? How do you get the parents involved?
Do you want me to take that one? Yeah, that's a great question. And, you know, we've seen obviously at primary school, it is easier for the parents to get involved because they're in the schoolyard, but at secondary school, parents don't get much of a look in. So great question. What we have done with schools is to run a community engagement survey, and we put that together with students, with the help of students and staff and our expertise, and really that goes out to the whole school community, so to students, to staff and to parents. And it's about asking them about how they feel about sustainability. How important is it to them that their school is implementing a sustainability program? And are they interested in being involved in that program? So it really communicates to parents what's happening, but it also asks them for their ideas. It asks them for their contributions if they're interested in being part of a team, and starts to engage that community around the sustainability vision. So we found the survey to be very effective, and it's amazing the number of parents at secondary level that really care about this and that really do want to help their schools progress down this pathway.
Yeah, and that's certainly we've seen that employed with great success. It's amazing how many parents come out and want to get involved.
Yes.
I think that's a really topical one. This one's, you had a big thanks for that one too. Thank you, Claire. I think this is a topical one. So with all the current restrictions in place and schools being closed, is it possible to start or continue a sustainability program at the moment?
I'll grab that one. Absolutely it is. I think it goes back to the earlier point of looking at what you've got in place already. Understand your now and start building your your capabilities to then set in place your strategy and your program going forward. So as Claire said, talk to your community, and you can do that via an online survey to find out what they think and what they feel and what sort of level of support you can get from them. And those surveys can go out to staff members and students and, as I say, the parent community. And then you can start building your program, describe your vision and start sharing that. And then I think you can set budgets. You can perhaps sign up to Resource Smart Schools program. That's a Sustainability Victorian Government initiative that Claire was talking about, and that's free to join up. And that can give you a really good framework from which to springboard and start your program.
The one of the attendees has said the community engagement survey sounds great. Do you have a sample to share?
Yeah, we could probably, it would be great to get contact details of that person and we could talk through, because we tend to tailor that survey depending on the school. So yes, we would love to talk with you about the survey and how you can develop that and some of the key questions that you might like to include.
Awesome. I'll make a note of that for that school. The other
Matt, just before you go on, if there's another question, I just wanted to add to Lona's comment about, can the sustainability program progress in the current climate? And just give the example of a school in regional Victoria that I'm currently working with. And so we're doing all our sustainability work at the moment via Zoom or via Microsoft Teams. And in fact, we're able to progress an incredible amount in using that medium. So schools don't need to think that going online should stop anything. It's important to progress, and it's possible to progress online. I think Matt might have frozen.
I think that's the quietest Matt will ever be.
I'm not sure whether Matt can hear us, but there's certainly been a freeze. Oh, it looks like he's going to go and try and rectify the IT issues. And unfortunately, we don't have access to the questions that have come through. Just bear with us.
Yeah. Well, perhaps a question, and I might throw it over to you, Claire, that came from a school that I was working with recently, that they put some recycling bins out at the school, but the students and staff aren't actually using them properly. How do they make those bins work more effectively? What's going wrong, really, for them?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question and a good one, because I think a lot of schools do have that problem. They really get enthusiastic about recycling and they put lots of bins in place and they don't always put signage up, and then they expect that students are just going to use them. And in fact, as we saw with the story of the school that I shared with you, was a much bigger process than just putting a bin in place. It's really all in the communication and the education and the engagement around the change that's happening. Because ultimately we're talking about behaviour change, and that's a really big thing to make happen. So it's important for school. Oh, look, we've got Matt back. Well, I'll just answer the rest of your question for your school owner. So it's really just important to communicate when change is going to take place with something like waste. Let people know what's happening and why it's happening and how it's going to impact those people that have to use that new system and what the benefits are. And I think you'll find that people are a lot more accepting of that change. And of course, good labelling, good signage, clear signage, consistent signage, consistent bins, and then follow-up education. So yeah, it's about communication and education.
Yeah, great.
How did everyone enjoy my IT meltdown? Far out.
Lona said that might be the quietest that you've been in a long time.
I did have one last question here on the Resource Smart Schools framework. I think that's pretty important, especially down in Vic. So general consensus or feedback that could be quite demanding or administratively heavy. Thoughts from you about that?
Claire and I we first came across Resource Smart Schools when we were actually parents ourselves, and it's about 12 years ago now, and we were very new to it, but we were just obviously very passionate that we wanted our school, our primary school, to start really taking notice of sustainability and making some changes at the school. And we came across Resource Smart Schools quite by chance. But I think it was actually the best thing that happened to us, because it provided us with this amazing framework from within which we could then develop our own sustainability program. And it covered all aspects. It's modular. So it is split into waste, water, energy, biodiversity and core, which covers curriculum and really laying foundations for your program. So I think whilst I know there's a lot of feedback from schools that it is quite, as Matt said, administratively time consuming, it's quite demanding. But I think aside from that, I think if your school is committed to sustainability and it's really looking to effectively embed sustainability long term, I think the framework gives a fantastic model from within which to work and personalize and adapt for your own school's vision and purpose. So it's free, as I said, to join up. So it doesn't cost you anything. It's very simple, and I think it provides, as I say, that framework, that guidance, and it ensures that your school's program continues to have focus and momentum. So I would recommend it. Claire and I use it, and we support our schools through it, and we found it a really fantastic model.
And isn't that a critical piece, isn't it? You've got to have a framework. You've got to start somewhere. So
I think that's right. And as I say, it gives you the strategy and it ensures focus and momentum, which I think for any program is vital.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And look, conscious that it's coming up for 4:30, unless there are any further questions, we might allow everyone to press on with their day. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming along. We will package up the recording from today and the slide decks to make available to you all. We'll send you out a communication as a follow-up from today. The details for Lona and Claire have been displayed, I see, for the last little while, so please do reach out if you've got any questions directly. Otherwise, thank you very much, everyone, for your time. Keep safe and keep healthy.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
you. Bye.